Call this meeting to order of the Oconee County Planning Commission, May the 21st at 6 p.m. Our first order of business is invocation.
Yes, sir. Ready for invite to? Our Father, our Creator, and creator in this magnificent universe. Live and move and have our being to thank to good health. Guidance not to be self-centered, self-important, selfless, and self. Commission members to give them the time to do this, give them wisdom, guidance, help us all to do our part of this system.
All stand for the pledge, please. Mr. Markovich, will you lead us?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, sir. Approval of the minutes. Have y'all had a chance to read the minutes from May 7th? Do I have a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
I'll second that.
Any corrections? Or
I didn't take any notes to the directions.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. We don't have any, we've sort of changed the format. Now we're having public comment for non-agenda items at the beginning of the meeting, and then we'll have public comment before our discussion on each item. You get a 2 minutes to discuss or to comment on the item. So we don't have any non-agenda items right now, so we'll go with a staff update.
Certainly. Here we go. So I also staff the Agricultural Advisory Board. I just wanted to pick out some quick little facts here. American Farmland Trust is predicting a 50% need for more food, fuel, and fiber by 2050. Since '92, the country's lost 31 million acres of prime farmland. That's basically all of New York State or Iowa. But Oconee County is second in poultry production in South Carolina, sixth in equine, eighth in cattle, eighth in sheep, and 10th in total agricultural sales for Oconee County. And I just think agriculture is very important, and I know our two agriculture planning commission members also feel the same way. Just wanted to point that out to y'all. Just little fun facts.
Okay. All right, we want to move to item number 7, discussion on the BZA ad hoc committee recommendations on notice changes and fee change for BZA hearing. At this time, we'll have a public comment. Mr. Markovich.
For the record, I am Tom Markovich. I have spent some time considering what has been addressed as far as changing the requirements on the notice. One, I've been surprised at several meetings when I've heard that supposedly that our notice requirements are not in our code of ordinances or in the state statute, and of course they are. Always have been there from day one. And so, but next, I really don't have any issues with the idea of increasing the time limit from 15 days to 21. It seems like reasonable, and it seems like staff could still get their job done within that time period. However, when it comes to the other items, I would be a little concerned in terms of the means of notice and everything else, because all of this is laid out very precisely in state law. And most of it has become this way from lawsuits, and all of this stuff has been looked at by the courts. And even though that language may seem like it's a real simple little sentence, it is a very exact sentence, and it means very exact things. I would be careful about about moving off that main language too much, because it's very specific in what it means, and the courts understand exactly what it means. And specifically when it comes down to the idea of noticing people who are not adjacent to the property, that's all about standing and who would be able to bring a case if one came. And the opportunity to still be heard is going to be heard by anybody, any party. Anybody can be heard. So, but when it comes down to the actual notice and who can actually bring a case if there were one, somebody would have to have standing. And I don't see the point in notifying people that don't have standing. It just doesn't make sense to me. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mike Smith?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Mike Smith, previous ex-member of the BZA Ad Hoc Committee, and I want to emphasize the word ex. 2 points I want to make to refresh your memory, and one thought about the BZA fee structure. I want to start you thinking about the BZA fee structure. Point one, what you have before you are the committee's recommendations, voted on and forwarded by the committee for your review, and hopefully, unless there's a significant glaring error, approved for codification. Point two, it is better to over-communicate rather than under-communicate. You'll be quickly criticized for under-communicating, but not for over-communicating. About thinking about the filing fee, what about a two-tier system? Now I've got your attention. Other communities are doing this. I'm suggesting a higher fee for end users that have a market capitalization. I emphasize the word end users. These companies don't own these structures they rent or lease, but they are built by companies that don't have market capitalization. The key word is end user. Dollar General is a good example. These companies have done their business plan, and a higher fee will not deter them from doing business here. Other communities are doing this. You could have a second fee that will be lower for those that don't have market capitalization. An example would be a citizen starting a storage business. Thank you.
Okay, that's all the, we have signed up for this item.
Pardon me, sir. Perhaps that wasn't clear.
I must have not signed up at the right place. I signed up somewhere for this.
You signed up for the next one, sir. You signed up for item number 8 on the agenda.
That's it.
Okay, you can go ahead and speak at this one.
My name is Jim Codner, for the record. I want to commend to you the summary of BZA notification requirements that staff has pulled together. I think it's an excellent description of what's necessary for Oconee County. I agree with the previous statement that state law is very clear, but it's inadequate. It's really inadequate for the needs of Oconee County. And we've had discussion after discussion on this, been around and around. Staff has developed wording that reflects input from Planning Commission in the past couple of meetings. The 250-foot radius, I think, is an excellent compromise, an excellent approach to the notification requirements. And I'd certainly commend to you, please consider approving the entire presentation as presented by staff. Thank you.
Okay, at this time we'll have discussion with the Planning Commission members.
How do our proposed changes, how do they differ from the state requirements?
So the state leaves, I can't speak with authority on exactly what the state does. I'll show you what we do now, which falls well within the state requirements. So what we do now is up here on the screen. That's what we do. It's never been codified, and it's, can I blow it up a little bit? If you give me a second, I'll make it a little larger. How about that? And it's also in your backup material as well. This is the legal basis for it. So this is why we do, this is what we do, this is why we do it. Right now it's 15 days notice. That's for mailings, postings, and newspaper advertisements. as well as property postings and things like that. We do a 250-foot radius. I don't know where the 250-foot number came from or where it originated. I'm sure it originated somewhere, but it's what we've utilized. And written notice was done at the beginning of the year. Agendas posted at least 24 hours prior to the BZA, and I do a media blast the same day everything is posted. So usually the Wednesday before the meeting, I notify. I have a 50-person media mailing list. Also, for instance, like Mr. Codner and Mr. Markovich are on it as well. I believe Mr. Smith as well. That's kind of a broad kind of shotgun approach to notification. The next page is what the ad hoc committee recommended. And I underlined the kind of differences between what the ad hoc recommendations are and versus the next couple pages, which are the kind of the staff play on it. So with the ad hoc one, they had 2 different dates for notification. 15 days for a newspaper ad, a legal advertisement, which is required, and then 21 days for signage, mailings, things of that nature. Then they also had number 3, notifying adjacent landowners, and then notifying adjacent landowners 2 deep, as in like 2 properties from there. I did speak with Mr. Codner and Mr. Smith between the meetings, and a radius is a much more effective means of communicating out how far to go, because if you do an abutting property, that makes sense, okay, it's your neighbor. Well, what about across the street? Well, what if the street's privately owned? Okay, we worked that out. Well, what about a water body? So it's a creek, okay, so the next neighbor, what about Lake Kiwi? You know, there's all these if-then, but-then scenarios we have to do if we're going to do abutting properties. A radius is a cleaner thing, and our system is set up to measure from exterior property lines the radius out. So it's something we already do. There's no change in there, we're just codifying that. So that's the ad hoc committee recommendation. And the ad hoc committee also recommended striking some language that's no longer relevant. That makes sense. It's just extraneous information inside the code. And so then the final page of this part of it is the staff recommendations. It says 21 days is all the notification. Newspaper ads going in at least 21 days before. The mailings are going out or posting 21 days before. Instead of 2 different dates, we're just going to get it all done at once. And we're going to treat the variance, the special exceptions, the cell phone towers, all the same. There shouldn't be a difference in communication regarding that. And then we're keeping the radius. So staff took planning commission input, ad hoc commission input, and kind of mashed them together, and that's what we came with. Because I remember Ms. Lyles was she talked about the radius quite a bit. So I'm not speaking for her, I just recall that the last meeting she was more of a fan of the radius than the abutting properties and the kind of extra language that entailed. And also
So
that
this, on this one, that's the staff recommendations, the 9 square feet for the property sign. What size property sign do we do now?
It's 9 square feet.
It is.
Yeah, I didn't differ from that at all. That's what something they recommended, and 4 inches. We're gonna have to go buy more signs anyways, because I think we're gonna have like 3 or 4 things in this month's coming BZA docket anyhow. So I'll just have some of those 4-inch letters made. Also, Mr. Roothead, I'm trying to find here in the email, which you sent me. The setback. No, I don't have it now. Can you tell me what that language is?
Mr. Chairman, yes, I'm just looking over the materials today, and the staff recommendation version on 38-6.3, paragraph 2, item A, place at least 1 sign along each road frontage that abuts the property asking for a BZA hearing. I'm not imposing any objection. The state law says, and also, it doesn't say also, it just says, on or adjacent to the subject property. I think Adam may have left that out inadvertently, so I just suggested that be included in the ordinance that goes up, since that is the state law requirement. In addition to the road frontage postings, and the additional posting, that it be posted, the actual property be posted.
Mr. Root, if you could, I mean, is there anything in here we're doing that contradicts state law? Or, I mean, there's been talk that all this stuff is on the books, but it's not spelled out. So now we're spelling some things out, and then are we gonna get ourselves in potentially legal trouble for spelling things out?
Yeah, that's always a possibility, that if you go, put too many words out there, that you get more rope, I suppose, to potentially hang yourself with. There's nothing that is truly contradictory unless you think of a 15-day requirement being contradictory with a 21-day requirement. They're not equal, but it's not, you're not going less than a state requirement, you're adding more. Certainly the 250 foot radius, that's different, that is not in the state law. The size of the sign is different, not in the state law. And the number of postings is different, not in the state law. Those are all extras, and as I understand, the purpose was to make sure that the notification is to more rather than less, and nothing, I wouldn't consider anything contradictory in the sense that I understand what you're saying, but it's more than is outlined in the state law.
Does that expose ourselves to lawsuits or?
Now, somebody, were I a complaining party, I could say that, hey, this BZA hearing, where whatever happened that I didn't like was not properly held because a letter didn't go out to the proper property owner within that 250 foot radius. There's case law out there that does not nullify a BZA decision. But there'll be things like that, I suppose, that when you put out more procedures to follow, and those aren't followed, and you have somebody who has an interest adverse to the ruling, they're gonna look for things like that, procedural hiccups. So, yeah, in that sense, perhaps, but that's the give and take, I suppose, with putting more out there.
I mean, again, speaking, it seems like these things are always a good idea until we quantify them, or try to quantify them. And I go back to the definition of rustic elegance, we still haven't defined that in 2.5 years. And I just don't wanna make sure, again, that we're doing something here that's gonna come back and, have unintended consequences. And even like the 250 foot radius, that seems very reasonable, but where is the point of the radius that we're measuring from? Is that?
I think that's the outer perimeter of the property.
Is the word radius commonly used in this context?
He could probably speak better than I've not come across it a lot, but I haven't examined all other county ordinances.
I'm used to the definition of a radius being what my 3rd grade teacher taught me, which is from the center of a circle to the outside of the circle.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a geometric.
There's no circles involved here unless we got some circular properties.
I guess it'd be similar more to a buffer or some sort of extension, 250 feet out. We'd have to come up with some better language. I agree, radius, people commonly think of a point and around as opposed to 250 foot barrier from the outside perimeter of the property, which is what I understand the procedure is now, what is intended to be codified. So I think you're right, some better language for that, but like I said, when you add more procedures, there may be more room for somebody to attack it if you don't do it correctly, but that's not to say that if you do it correctly, it won't get attacked anyways. People will find a reason if they don't like it to attack the decision. I had, from my initial heartburn was more in treating variances and special exceptions differently. That's no longer the case, and that was my, as far as any kind of pushback legally, I had some problems. Equal protection, due process type problems in treating those two issues differently, which is no longer the case.
We have BZA once a month?
Once a month as needed, yes, sir.
Okay. Round figures or guesstimate last year or this year to date, how many?
This year to date, let's see, I think we've had three.
Three
Say three?
cases or 3 meetings?
three meetings and cases, we've only done one. I'm pretty sure they've all been single items. I can look real quick if you'd like for me to. Doing this from behind my head here. You all, of course, have seen our new website. It's fantastic. So we've had three meetings this year with, the one of each, so.
Adam, would you describe a typical variance or special exception?
Special exemption is, so far, has been cell phone towers. Cell phone towers, by the definition in our code, communication towers, by the definition in our code, require a special exception.
What about a variance?
So we had a gentleman who had built a house where he ran the property, like what he thought was the property line. He lined up with the telephone pole because it had a marker on it. And it turns out the telephone pole was actually not his property boundary marker. It was a little closer to the house. So he inadvertently began building the house basically onto the property line. So there was a variance for the setback requirements because he had already poured concrete.
So it could be a setback variance. The only reason I'm saying that is I understood it as a 250-foot radius.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody that owns 30 acres of land and they're trying to do something that affects no one else, that no one else would ever actually see or be affected by, and now we're coming out and sharing something with 250 feet of that 30 acres or 50 acres or 1,000 acres. To me, it made more sense when it was a 250-foot radius of whatever it is they're wanting to do and wherever it is they're wanting to do it.
So in that case, you wouldn't notify anybody because
Correct.
Because a communication tower has to have a fall zone equal to its height. So a 200-foot cell phone tower has a 200-foot fall zone, so it has to be at least 200 feet away from the property line. So if you wouldn't share that information, you wouldn't then notify anyone sticking with 250 feet.
And I realize that cell towers
Or
come
200.
into a whole different thing. I'm just thinking of some of the variances out there that just are not a big deal at all as a variance, and now all of a sudden we're having to go 250 feet away from the property, which could be 10 people, it could be 30 people, when nobody would ever know it was even there if they weren't told that it was there. To me, that creates a hardship potentially on that individual.
It could. I couldn't even tell you how long we've been using 250 feet, but I imagine it's been some time. I don't know if anybody has any. No one has any idea. No.
I don't know, the radius made sense from the discrepancy.
So I have easy access to 250 feet from the property lines, and I can show it to you if you like how we go about establishing that. The tax assessor has a neat little tool that allows us just to measure a distance. And if you'd like for me to show it to you real quick, I shall.
But you don't have the ability on the computer to do a true circle and then it identifies everybody that touches within that circle.
I could do it through mapping. Yes, it could be done. I wouldn't. You just utilize like Google Earth or something like that, since that's more subjective. It's not precise. And back to what Mr. Root was saying, if somebody thought they didn't get it right and we were just using the Google Earth to draw a radius, they'd be like, yeah, that's off by 10 feet. So let me show you what we do here. Departments, assessor, look up property info, is that it? Search by map. Actually, let me go back here, search by location address, 415. Yes. Why are we not here? Anyhow, without trying to point out anyone's property, why is the county, why are we not here? No. Oh, no. Well, this worked in my office. Huh? There we go. So this is us right here. So property card, generate list by radius. We can adjust the foot. So this is everyone within 500 feet of where we are right now. And that shows all the property owners within 500 feet. So the yellow is is where we are right now, and the school board building. Assuming it's the school board building. And then that's everything within 500 feet.
Gotcha.
And so it's measured from the exterior lines. So there's, in 500 feet of here, there's 49 various different properties within 250 feet. So you do end up notifying more people using the radius versus using the abutting properties. But as was, I believe Mr. Smith said in the last meeting, not everybody here has a 50-acre parcel. So by using the touching just at the abutting properties, you notify fewer people, the smaller lot size you get. Conversely, you would notify much more people, the larger or the smaller lot size you get. So I suppose what you're saying, you do notify more people, it gives more people a say in what you do with your property, which could be a hardship, as you said.
I could see it on a cell tower. I just have a hard time seeing it on a variance. Cell tower, you're going to be in view. It affects more people than a variance affects.
Could.
But that's
But that goes back to what Mr. Root was saying, that we shouldn't treat one differently, correct?
Yes, that's my opinion.
You're the legal scholar.
I'm legal scholar. There's not a whole lot of case law out there about equal protection treatment between classes of persons seeking variances versus persons seeking special exceptions, though I will say that of the categories, it seems like that the tendency was to treat special exceptions not more harshly, but have the hurdles higher to jump, whereas historically, case law and the treatises that comment on the two, variances, you have a law. Someone is trying to do something different than that law. They're trying to vary the terms of law as applied to them. Special exception is allowable under the law as it is. It's just you have to meet these certain criteria to do it. So if you're going to look at those two in a basic framework, a variance is a bigger deal. Put it in, I guess, simplest terms. But I simply like the fact of them both being treated the same. I think forecasting out potential problems is better.
okay.
So I think I know the answer to this question, but like, by requiring on the communication towers, you know, the balloon test or a rendering, is that treating special exemption differently?
Okay, so it's not treating special exceptions differently than variances in that context because it's only cell towers that are allowable. All right, so if we have a classification, right, we're treating persons seeking special exceptions differently. So within this class of persons, all seeking special exceptions, we're going to pluck out cell tower people that have to do something else. And that's allowable. It is treating the class dissimilarly. It's allowable if you have some sort of reasonable justification for doing it. And y'all could pop out probably a few. How it's going to impact your neighbors. You know, you can't use health concerns as one of those criteria because that's the FDA, whatever, I can't think of it right now. FTC, one of the federal organizations.
FCC.
FCC, thank you. Doesn't allow that, but there's a reasonable justification for adding that extra hurdle, I guess, or extra obligation on cell towers. I know wouldn't be the only county to do it. I think Georgetown does it. I'm not sure which others, but it's not novel.
Okay, on the back of the page, where you're placing a recommendation on the application for the BZA hearing that the variance and special exception applicant should informally meet with the property owners potentially impacted by the request. I don't necessarily like the word should. I think that should be changed to, or asked to, A-R-E, asked to. It just sounds better to me than should. To me is almost saying this is what you've got to do, or you're not getting a special exception.
I kind of agree. I was going to have the same comment. It says should formally, then it says this is not mandatory, but kind of,
You were asked.
I mean, I really don't, I mean, this whole thing, I really don't, the notification process to me has been lackluster at best in the past. When you see a sign that.
Public hearing,
say
right.
Public hearing, nobody knows what that means.
Right.
Or 80% or 90% of the people. So nicer, better signs, 21 days. Again, if this is as small as we can do and keep everybody happy, then I really don't have a problem with it other than that last sentence. I'm doing the most of talking here, so.
If I may, so should, in my world, is just, it might as well be, you should use toothpaste every night. It's not a mandatory statement. A shall is. A should is, we strongly recommend it, but right after it does say it's not mandatory. But if it's just the language that you're unhappy with, I certainly can put in,
How about are encouraged?
are encouraged.
Are encouraged would be a
But that all means the same thing, so.
If we're just encouraging or suggesting, does that hold any legal water in anything if they don't follow the suggestion?
No.
Nope.
And if not, why are we putting it in there?
That was part of the ad hoc committee's recommendation. And it just goes on the form, the application. It wouldn't go in the code itself. But that's the only reason why it's in there, is that it was part of that recommendation package.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
As I understand it, and there's some historical, or I have some experience with this in any event from a few years ago, a couple years ago, that may help the BZA out if an applicant decides to do that. That may get rid of some of the issues that present at the BZA. When it's difficult to somewhat communicate, it becomes a little adversarial, it becomes, maybe it's gotten better since last time I was here, but it's a little bit adversarial and it's a little bit truncated. It's hard to get your opinion out there. And I think that ideas, maybe some of these things can be resolved and neighbors can be kept good neighbors if they meet informally. So that's why the encouragement is there. That's my thinking, and that's, as applied, I can see how that could work. But you're right, it's not mandatory, it's not going to have any legal bearing, shouldn't have any legal bearing on the process.
Did we resolve the 250-foot radius phrase, or did we?
I mean, do we, as far as resolve it goes, you mean like the word radius versus some other?
Radius versus something else.
I don't have another word for radius. I think it's a common.
To all landowners within 250 feet of the property. I mean, you don't have to put radius, just 250 feet of the property. Subject property, so that would.
On all sides of the property, or on all adjoining sides?
Yeah, you could add that. If I just said 250 feet of the property, I know that the property line 250 feet extended out, but I may be just thinking too simply.
All right, so we've got update language in 2A that he had listed, right? And then update in 3 with the 250-foot radius, change that language. And in the last sentence, applicants are encouraged. Does this sound like what we've got laid out? Yep.
Good. Mr. Kisker, does this work as adjacent landowners notification, county planning staff shall produce and mail letters to all landowners within, strike the A, within 250 feet of the project area's property lines? That- Good.
Sounds good to me.
Yep. Any further discussion?
Should that be from the property line of the property that the project is owned, or from the actual project itself?
It's property lines.
The way we're talking about it is from the property lines itself, not from the actual property, not from the project, because if it's a communication tower, which is what set off this whole, where we are right now, no one else would get notified because the fall zone for the communication tower is equal to its height. So 200-foot communication tower has to fall 200 feet, and that fall zone has to be within that property. So no one would get notified if it was from the actual location of the communication tower, per se.
Well, I'll make a motion to approve the staff recommendations with those 3 noted changes.
Second. All right, we got a motion and a second.
I'm looking at a sure.
And a sure. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That's it, with the changes.
All right.
Okay. Item number 8, discussion on clarification of certain code sections bearing on land use and development as contained in chapter 26, 32, and 38 of the Oconee County Code of Ordinance. We have one person to speak.
Mr. Chair, if I may, we had that one other item regarding the fee increase for the BZA.
Sorry. Do it again, didn't
I did it again, I apologize, sir.
I? Discussion on the fee change for the application fee. Staff, do you have anything to say about it before we discuss that?
So I wrote this up as per instructed to. It says 250 there. It feels a little steep for some of the potential variances. We spend more than $100 to put on these things between staff time and mailings and legal ads, and really the time spent with the applicant and then time spent with the public around it. So for instance, the contentious self-communication tower thing, I think Bill Huggins, the other planner, he spent probably 3 full days talking to various people involved in this. Some other things, we don't really have very much, no one really has any issues with it. So we probably spend closer to $200. We definitely spend more than $100. So $250 was put out there. $200 or $250 would definitely cover county investment into a BZA hearing. So that would be.
So is staff recommending we change it from 250 to 200?
I think 200 kind of feels more approachable, reachable, because so all the communication towers, they have $200. That's not a big deal. But thinking more towards the gentleman who built over his property line by accident. Like that wasn't like, that $200, the $100 meant something to him. The $200, $250, everything counts.
I'd like to get Mr. Root's opinion on kind of what Mr. Smith said earlier about, and I'm not in favor of making people pay more because they can, but obviously more time goes into a simple property line variance than a cell tower.
That's correct.
Are we allowed to treat a special exception permit more than a simple variance?
I guess my kickback to that is it's gonna be difficult to forecast before a very particularized sliding scale unless somebody's already invented this wheel. As the example that Mr. Smith gave, a Dollar General, dollar store versus a startup, I don't like that because they're both businesses. As far as charging one a different rate than another. based on ability to pay, I don't think that would be a good idea from a legal standpoint. As far as there being some sliding scale based on the amount of time and cost, yes, I just think that's gonna be difficult to forecast. Maybe somebody's done it, I don't work in the departments, I don't know the nature of, you know, these items and what takes what. We just wanna have it correlate at least pretty tightly the fee versus the amount of time it takes to provide the service, because we're not trying to make money from it.
Well, I think irregardless, I think it's, even the 250 just for a regular variance is probably low. For the mailings you have to do,
Right.
postage, printing, signs, time,
Time's the big one.
you know. But I'm not gonna, I just wanted a quick opinion on that one. I mean, it seems like, again, I'm not in favor of charging more because they, you know, charging AT&T more because they got the money. That's not the reason. It's because there's a lot more involved in a special exception than just a simple property line variance or something like that. But if we can't do it, then
What's the purpose of having a fee?
So, actually, someone asked me this. So, if you go to get your car oil changed, they're gonna change your oil, they're gonna top up your fluids, put some air in your tires. That's basically your property taxes. You've paid that for the rule book. For our county code of ordinances, you've paid for that. That's your oil change. Now, they're gonna try to sell you a rotation, an air filter for 10 grand. That's the BZA. It's an extra service that the county provided because you bought the rule book and you want to change the rule book, or you somehow want to utilize the rule book in a different fashion than it was voted upon and legislated to be.
So the Board of Zoning Appeals needs to be self-funding, is what you're saying?
It's the Board of Zoning Appeals doesn't know, but the government itself does, because the Board of Zoning Appeals, they don't get, they think they get $100 a year or something like that, total, just for what you all do. They get that, so it's not the BZA time, it's the rest of the county time and resources.
Mr. Chair, if I may, Mr. Graham, and just to, I think, to point out what Mr. McCall had stated at the last budget meeting was that if these fees aren't commensurate with the amount of cost that the county puts in, then it's gonna have to be made up with taxes otherwise, which he was opposed to. So that's why he was looking, is having a full fee analysis done, not only here, but for our full slate of fees to see what needs to be increased if taxes don't go too low.
Well, I'm just thinking is the higher we make these fees, the more we're looking to discourage people from having to pay these fees. If we're looking to discourage this kind of thing, we want to go to the highest fee we can. I don't really think the purpose of our government is to support itself by making fees high enough to where they don't have to do anything.
I think the idea is if I want to change something in the law book, I should pay to have that done for me, as opposed to have all of us pay for somebody that wants to have a variance or something done differently. I don't think the fees are meant to bring in money, but to reimburse the signs, the mailings, the advertising. I mean, I think that's the goal, is to say this is not a gain or loss for the county. This is paying for the operation to do that.
I move that we change it from $100 to $200.
I'll second that. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Was there
So
anything
you want to
else?
draft a new one and?
What?
That was unanimous?
Yeah. You want to draft a new letter and we'll,
Yes, sir.
if you can, you can sign it later time. Okay. Now we can move to the next one, right?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Markovich.
Thank you for hearing me on this. I have spent some time and both conversation with Mr. Chapman and studying these revisions to the subdivision requirements. And in general, I understand the problem that staff has when people try to go around what's in place and they come in and carve off a lot at a time and develop it and just keep going, and eventually they surpass the requirements of what's required to subdivide property. So I don't have any issues with that particular portion of what he's trying to resolve there. And so I don't have any issues with the definition or the submittals. I do question under the submittal process, he still has one, a part B that says the development does not violate the intent of the subdivision or zoning ordinances. I'm not sure how you arrive at whether or not somebody has violated the intent. In other words, that's a rather subjective idea. What intent of the ordinance means could mean any number of things to any of us. So that might be a little difficult. I understand what he's trying to say, but it might be a little bit difficult to, if he had to enforce it, I don't know how you enforce intent. The project either fits the process or it doesn't. It's that simple. What's intent got to do with that? All right, now, next, access to the lots. I have a huge problem with requiring 3 lots to have one access on what we call secondary roads, or what otherwise known as farm to market roads, the secondary highway system, and for various reasons. But number one, it's going to affect affordability in a big way. 2, you would have to lay out a very elaborate means of defining use for those driveways. I don't know how you protect somebody's rights when you got 3 different homeowners that are utilizing. It's one thing if they bring on themselves and decide that they want to share a driveway. When you begin to impose it, it becomes a whole different animal. And I think that would become very difficult to try and enforce. And what happens when somebody decides they're going to have a party, right? And they've got everybody's out there parking in their driveway and all that. And then one of the neighbors who's sharing that driveway has an emergency. They have to have EMS come out there. EMS can't get on the property. The fire department can't get on the property because it's all jammed up. I mean, there's just a lot of different issues there that kind of combine themselves. And then 3 comes down to, what if all 3 of these buildings are not built at the same time? And I've had this actually happen. I've built houses in Spinnaker Cove and Kiwi Key. And there was a road, there was 10 houses being serviced off this one driveway. And we were the second house in there. And by the time, and it was built as a driveway. I assure you, our equipment tore that road was gone in the second week that we were built. So I mean, did the rest of the homeowners, were they supposed to ante up and pay for that driveway to be put back? And every time a new house is built, are we going to go through the process again? Because we don't build driveways to hold up 30-ton trucks. And so that's just, another issue. And lastly, my big issue is the state is primarily charged with the responsibility for ingress and egress, period. And we need to leave it up to them and just let it be at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, bring it up for discussion. Planning Commission here?
Mr. Markovich actually expressed several things that I was looking through here saying, wow, this not only is a violation of private property rights in some areas, but just some of the things that you're imposing on individual owners is dangerous, to say the least. I really would like to go back. I understand that there is rogue development going on out there, and I understand that developers, based on the example, those should be dealt with. And I can show you 7 examples out in the county right now where developers cut the corners. But the way this is currently worded is really additionally affecting the private citizen after somebody has come and done something, not simply these developers who are trying to do things in a piecemeal fashion. I mean, when we start saying private and existing driveways and dwelling units, and, I mean, we're going well beyond development at that point. The 2-year time frame, again, I think we're going beyond the developer. If the developer, or in the name of the developer, if he develops so many lots here, and then so many lots here, and then so many lots here, and then so many lots here under his LLC, yeah, maybe we impose a time limit. But 2 guys buy from the developer 10 acres, and then one of them gets ready to build a house, and so he wants to subdivide that off because of his financing needs. Well, it was inside of that 2 years. Now he can't do it as a private owner of having purchased that.
So perhaps I can write that better. That's the intent, is to say, within the property boundaries, without utilizing the standards and submittal process for the major subdivision. So it wouldn't stop them. So going to let's see, the second paragraph, definition is where we're at.
Yes, sir.
So the second sentence says, the minor subdivision process may not be used a second time within 2 years within original property boundaries without utilizing the standards and submittal process for a major subdivision if the total number of lots, units, or combined thereof would constitute a major subdivision. So that's saying that, it's not saying you can't re-subdivide if you had that 10 acres. It's just saying that you're putting in a larger subdivision and you need to follow how the impact, say for instance, impact fees from roads. You're going to require to do that because you're putting a road in, because you're putting that many more units in. If there's other standards that need to be followed, you just need to follow the major subdivision rules. It's not saying you can't subdivide it, just saying you got to subdivide it per the larger, you're stepping up your game from a small thing to a larger thing.
And while that may apply to a developer, you've got, again, using my example, you've got 2 brothers who got excited. They bought a piece of property. They've got 10 acres. One of them decides he wants to build. He goes to get financing. They go, well, you really need to separate that out. Now you've fallen under a major subdivision. Now that may require an engineered study of the road, 20 grand out, just so that guy can now go get financing, because he's got to have somebody come in and tell him that road's okay. Because he's now a major subdivision, when it was just 2 guys wanting to split the land in half. He's not trying to do and skirt around an issue like a developer is. A developer, he's skirting around the issue because he doesn't want to pay that 20 grand for that road study. I understand that. And I think that maybe we can work on this in a way to say anything under this, a same LLC or anything under a same heading. But now you've got another private owner who doesn't necessarily know that he's about to get stuck with a potential big engineering bill when he's got a, quote, private driveway here or an existing driveway. And I sure don't understand the dwelling units thing here. I mean, to me, I'm sitting there going, okay, you've got a lady who's got a farm here. She's got in her farm, she's got a garage apartment, and down near the horse barn, she's got something for the stable hand down there. Now all of a sudden, her granddaughter needs to come stay because she's had a hardship and she needs to roll a single wide on that 20 acres. You've got dwelling units here that says, okay, now you got more than 3 dwelling units. Now you fall under a whole different category. If you put a car on that road, I think you're really violating private property rights. There are state laws that talk about if you access a state road, you've got to have view lanes, you've got to check the speed limit of the road, you've got to have so much stopping distance and things like that, and there's calls for that. Maybe we need those same things to work in regulating that from a county standpoint. But gosh, when you start talking about dwelling units, how many dwelling units do you have under that tax ID number? You're talking about violation of property rights now, I think. I just think that we don't have this worded right yet.
If I may, the control-free district, which compromises over 80% of the county, because it has no density, so if you have 10 acres and you can wedge them on there, you can put 100 mobile homes on there, or 100 stick-built tiny houses onto small pieces of property, which is fine. It just makes, we do have the nation's deadliest roads, and Greenville County is the deadliest county for roadway traffic. Last meeting you said we should focus on corridors in relation to access. So that's why related to access on this, I went with arterials and collectors. And so maybe collector is too much of a leap. But arterial circumference 123, using your same scenario there, would you want a dozen or 20 curb cuts all along 123 if the state would give it to them, if they have big enough frontage? So what is that, 100 feet or 75 feet the state needs on 123, putting that many private driveways up and down a corridor? So maybe this is better left for the corridor study, perhaps? I just wanted to bring it out there and put it out there.
I do think that corridors, and that's why we talk about corridor overlays, but it's not a one-size-fits-all county. There are roads out there that have no bearing on 123. They're not the same thing. And I don't think we should create a one-size-fits-all scenario. I do want to stop development from piecemealing and making things bad for the property owners who buy, who unknowingly are going to get stuck with big fees down the road in road maintenance and things like that. Don't disagree. I don't disagree with that at all. But I do fear that we are about to step on toes of individuals here in a big way.
So what would you like to do? You want to table this to a future meeting and let you look into it further?
I would like to ask that we table this for a future meeting. And I'd like to ask that we table this for a future meeting.
I don't mind doing that, but this is the third stab at this, I think. Third time?
Minor subdivision, as a standalone, this is the first time I think I've brought this up as an individual item. I've definitely brought this up to you all. Actually, this is probably your sixth time seeing it as a whole, because I started this whole process of showing you, then showing the planning committee, then showing you all things like that. So I'm assuming this is about your sixth time hearing about minor subdivision regulations.
I was trying to be nice.
I appreciate that. Is there anything that you like as a table? Anything you like about it?
I would like to see,
The
I would
font?
like to see this be more focused about a developer. If XYZ LLC owns property and they do this 3 and they do this 3 and they do this 3 under this LLC, yes, they are skirting around the process, and let's try to work some regulation into place to stop that. Maybe they'll change the name of the LLC for the next 3, but that's another, at least they're spending $800 and some attorney time to do that. At least it's going to slow them down through the process or irritate them a little bit. I just think when you get to the second tier or the third tier of ownership and they're still held to that and they didn't even realize it was there.
Okay, we have a motion to table it till next meeting. We need a second.
Second.
All right, any further discussion? If not, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Unanimous. Do we have any old business?
There's still more to this, sir, if I may.
Didn't I tell you to write all that stuff down where I know this?
I just figured I'd say it out loud, sir. I'll give it a larger font next time.
Yeah, well.
All right, so this is 38.9.3. So in two different parts of the code, we have two different ways of measuring setbacks. This one particular, the very top of it, the second sentence, the last sentence that's highlighted, says all this information applies to everything except for the control, all the zone districts except for the control-free district. And my intent here is not to add more restrictions and regulations on the control-free district. What I'm really looking to get the takeaway is to just get to where setbacks are all measured the same way. Right now, we have this contradicting another part of the code, and at least related to the setbacks. So this is the sentence I have issue with. So we could strike the language related to this, which would make control-free district, you would have some additional kind of larger structural issues, but the big one is the setbacks, or in how the setbacks are measured. That's really this kind of my takeaway that I'm trying to get to, is that we should measure all the setbacks when they abut a road right-of-way from the right-of-way line, not from just the property line, because there's, for instance, Kiwi School Road. Kiwi School Road is a center for the most part of it. The center of the road is the front property line of most of these people's property, which means you have, give or take, 12 feet of paved surface, and then you have give or take 13 feet of right-of-way, shoulder. That's 25 feet for a 50-foot right-of-way. So if you just measure 25 feet from the front property line, you're putting your house 13 feet, you're putting your house on the edge of the right-of-way. And if in the future we develop and expand, as we very well may, you're gonna have pavement creeping up to the front of buildings and structures and other things that are placed there. So if we measure from the right-of-way line, you'd be pushed back further than that and securing the right-of-way for the future growth of development of utilities and roadways.
So you're wanting to change that language to B?
So there's two options I gave here. There's probably more than that. I'd really like to, if we struck all this language out, it would open Control Free District up to some more regulations that aren't really focused on what my issue is with it. All right, this speaks to the number of flag lots and how flag lots are measured. That would be helpful to have, but I'm not married to it. That doesn't affect my life. The thing that really is the big contradiction in language is under setbacks. And it's 2B, 2 Bravo, where a property line abuts a street right-of-way, the setback shall be measured from the right-of-way line. That's really the one that's on the second page right underneath the drawing there. That's really the one I'm trying to feel out. I feel all the properties should be measured from the road right-of-way. That's just a conflict.
So the only thing you're changing in 9.3 is that one sentence?
If I were to wipe that sentence, erase that one sentence from Control Free District would then be open for all these additional, well, all these.
And your reasoning there is to measure from the right-of-way and not the property line?
That's correct. That's really where I'm trying to get to. That to me is the most important, of the conflicts we have in the code, which there are a couple. This is the one that affects the day-to-day and really a long-term growth management outlook. It's one of those little things, this one sentence, little things that could affect how a road's developed in the future.
And this is on county and state roads?
It doesn't specify, just a right-of-way. Any road right-of-way that comes up, you're measuring from that versus measuring from, for instance, say Kiwi School Road, the center line of the property, or center line of the road.
Mr. Attorney, does this make sense?
It does make sense, sure. For my money, B makes more sense and presents less problems. It simply harmonizes what we already put in place. We know we have setbacks in the control-free district. We've clarified how you define those setbacks. I mean, they're in the code now. We've modified the comp plan to address the fact that they're in the code. If you do A and eliminate that sentence altogether, I think you're opening up the control-free district to restrictions that have not been discussed previously. So I think B is probably, for my part, the better language because it doesn't make any changes. It just makes a clarification as far as, all right, we're measuring from setback or the roadside setback from the right-of-way.
I'm going with the attorney.
I'm good with that.
How many of our roads have personal property lines in the center of the road?
I can't give you an exact number, but a lot. Yeah, there's like Durham Brown Road. I know Kiwi School, I keep repeating that one because that's the one I deal with on a pretty regular basis.
Are there any state roads that are like that, or are we just talking county roads?
There are state roads
There
like
are a
that as
few
well.
of those too. So do we need a motion to change this out?
Oh, yes, sir, you have to.
Okay, we need a motion to the last sentence of 9.3, where it says the control-free district shall be exempt from the provisions of this section. We need to,
Actually, are you making that motion?
yes, I'm gonna make that motion.
Because that's not what
You want,
Brad talked about.
you want this B where that sentence is at,
No, B to be added to that sentence.
then you'll be saying the same thing twice.
It's just,
Is it?
It's just swapping those sentences out.
Okay,
to be,
okay. Okay, yep, you're right, sorry.
So my motion is to take the last sentence, take it out and replace it with B.
Okay, yep, you're right.
Uh,
So that's the motion, so.
I'll second that motion.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
I'm gonna abstain. I just don't understand.
Do you have a sheet?
Well, then,
That
you
abstention
abstain, we
sheet?
don't pass it.
No.
He wants to abstain.
We still got a four.
You still got a quorum without me.
Yeah, still got a four vote.
We're good. If we could, Mr. Gramling, before, at least next meeting, we have a sheet for anyone, for when one abstains from a vote, just to say why you abstain. So we just a reminder, we can catch that so we can put it into the record next time.
It was a 4-0,
4-0-1, yes, sir.
but one abstain.
Sorry, trouble counting.
Okay. Anything else, Mr. Adam?
No, sir.
Okay. We have any old business? Any new business? Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. All in favor? Well, that one always gets unanimous.